Good morning, everyone. Good old Monday morning, nice and quiet in here, and uh, moving slower probably than the rest of the week, but that's all right. Um, yeah, today I'm like pretty excited about this lesson, refactoring API consumption, just because this is like a great um, a great way for y'all to see two of the pillars of OOP in action. And those pillars are going to be abstraction and encapsulation, and really thinking about like how we can accomplish those two pillars for API consumption. And what else did I want to say about it? Yeah, it's interesting because we're going to do this kind of like different type of development maybe than you've seen before, where it's declarative programming is what it's called. And basically I'm just going to like dream drive what I wish existed and how clean I wish my code was, and then let my tests guide me from there. So as long as we have tests, then we can feel pretty good about this like refactoring pattern. There is one other thing I wanted to just like address from some of the feedback that we got. Appreciate all of y'all that gave us that feedback, both in class surveys and weekly surveys. So there's some feedback that, they some students weren't happy with, the kind of like go and do this on your own type of lesson, and implement this on your own. Here's some resources. Some of them might be slightly outdated, and some of them might not be exactly what you expected. And what I'll say to that is, we're, we're going to do things like that because part of doing this job and doing it well professionally is doing things on your own and being self-sufficient in a way that you can go check out resources. They might not all be perfect, right? Like the Turing lessons resources, I feel like y'all can think of those as like a crutch that won't be there on the job, right? And being able to look up documentation and apply that is literally like what you do all day, every day, when you're on the job. So we're not going to have like, it's not only going to be lessons like that, but we are going to have probably at least one per week where that is the structure. And I want y'all to try to think about that as an opportunity. And some of you are, I can tell by the feedback, like some of you are like looking at that as like, oh, this is my opportunity to go struggle on my own, see if I can implement things. And remember, like I'm available as a resource when we have those types of classes. You're not totally on your own because you can pop in this room and ask me anything you want. And I think like if you look at those classes and you say, this isn't what I'm here for, this is a waste of my time, I didn't sign up for this at Turing, then that's like a poor mindset. It's really a fixed mindset, and you're not going to get as much out of those classes. But if you look at those classes as an opportunity to struggle and kind of like practice doing the job, then I think that you can get a lot more out of them. So that's what I'll say about that. Yeah, cool. What else? Yeah, let's jump into this thing. Any like follow up or questions about that? Anything that's on y'all's mind? Okay. So first thing I want to do is talk about the code that I pushed up on this starter branch. Let me share, just orient us here. Get you guys over here. Cool. All right, so we're on this refactoring start. And one thing to do whenever like you get to some new code that you're not familiar with, I think the best place to start is always going to be the tests, because remember, the tests are going to serve us as like documentation for what I'm trying to accomplish, right? That feature test that I wrote basically is my navigation for the entire, like I added a lot of code, but if we go to the features test and start there, then that's like how I can now navigate this and break this down a little bit easier. So let's start there. What did I say? House search state house member spec. So even the name of my file, right, gives me some help as to like what I've done here. And this is how I want y'all to think about tests. It's like, okay, like what are we saying here? The state house member search, okay, this is the happy path. So this is exactly how we expect things to work. And let's go through it line by line. So I can search for house members by state. Great, that sounds like something that's a nice function for my app and for this API gives me. So the first thing that I'm doing is I'm reading in some JSON. So let's go check that out. Cool. So the name of this file is Colorado House Members JSON. And if I look at it, I can say, okay, it looks like this is a sample response that I'm probably going to use as part of my testing, because I don't actually want to like go out and get this. I don't actually want to like go out and get this specific endpoint and hit that within my test, because that's we've went over why that's a poor choice. But okay, I've got some results here. Looks like it's the top level of the JSON is results, which points to an array of what look to be hashes, but these are in this file, they're JSON objects, but we're going to treat them like hashes once we get into the code. So okay, that's line one. I've got an idea of what's going on there. And how did I get this? Well, I went to Postman, right? This is where Postman can be my buddy. I went over here to Postman, and I have this endpoint. The CO portion is kind of like the dynamic portion, and I knew that from the docs, where I could change this to any state and get a response. So when I hit this endpoint, that's how I end up getting this sample response that then I copy and paste it into my own project. Cool. All right, so then we've got this stub request line, right, from line 6 to line 14. And essentially what that's doing is it's saying like, hey, when you see this request in the code, which you will, go ahead and set these headers and return my JSON here with the status of 200. All right, so this is WebMock's syntax here, and I'm just using WebMock here to try to keep things simple. So the next thing I did is I went and I said, okay, I've got that stubbed response, or stubbed request, I should say, ready for me. And now I'm gonna go to the root path, and then now I should be able to select Colorado from state. So here's another area where this is new, right? But if I'm just following my tests, I know where to go to like find out what's going on. So bring this over. Let's go to the index. So now I go to this welcome index and I'm like, all right, that's my root path. So the test is going here, and then I'm selecting Colorado from state. And so that is where I now have to like do some work, maybe with my eyes, or maybe not. What I could do here is, because I know that Capybara is like looking for this selector, I can say Command F, state. And now I can see like, okay, that's obviously like pulling me right here to lines 14 through 18, which is a new form, which allows me to, looks like, select from, I have this form.select here. So it looks like it's allowing me to select from some drop down of US states. And I look at this US states and I'm like, well, that's odd. I didn't see where this was, I don't see this defined anywhere, but it looks like a local variable here. So obviously this needs to be defined somewhere in my code base. So now I'm thinking, okay, like I gotta, now the next step is to go figure out where this is. So if I copy this and I do a Command Shift F and search globally, now I can see, okay, here it is in my form, and also here it is in my module states helper. Okay, you might be thinking, well, where does states helper live? It's a good question. We've got this helpers folder, right? And I've got application helper, that I could use, which is kind of like these helpers are loaded up by default and available in your views and controllers. And so I made my own. I said, this is going to be my states helper. And all I did was define a method here that is basically a 2D array. And the nice thing about this, in this 2D array, so this is like a feature of using form.select. Let me bring up the index over here so you can see. All right, so this US states method here returns this 2D array. And what's nice about it, and I'll kind of like, I can show this in action on the page. What the user sees is the first element of each of these nested arrays. And then what is sent in params happens to be this, the second element, which is the states abbreviation, which happens to also be what I need to pass to ProPublica as part of the endpoint. So this is like a twofold kind of like implementation here. I'm thinking about user experience for the first element, or yeah, for the first element, and then I'm thinking about what my API needs for the second element. And now I've got this drop down that I could reuse anywhere I need to, anywhere that I want to have the user select a state. So I'll show you what this looks like on the page. Let me run the server real quick. Okay, so for this welcome controller, now I have this drop down and you can see it's all the state names. But when I'm passing, when this gets passed in params, again, that'll be the abbreviation. Cool. All right, so I think I've got a good understanding now of like what's happening here, but I also see this search state path, which I'm like, I don't know what route that is. I don't really know anything about that route yet. So maybe I'll go figure that out now. All right, let's do a Rake Routes.
Tim, you're muted.
My bad. I put the I put this thing up. Yeah. So thank you. I put this. So this prefix over here kind of like shows me what my path helpers are, and I can see that this is going to be a post to search state within my Congress controller in the action search state. Okay, great. Now I've got an idea of where to go next, right? And this is the reason I'm going through this, because this is how I want y'all to think about how to approach code that is brand new, right? Like y'all didn't write this, but your partner might have wrote this, or in this case I did. It's like we've got to go figure out and ensure that we understand all the elements of this before we kind of like jump in and make changes. Okay, so now I'll go to my controller. And here I see, okay, I've got a new action. And within this action, okay, there's quite a bit happening here. It looks like I'm creating a connection object with Faraday with my API key, similar to how I did it above. And then I have this new endpoint here where state is the dynamic piece, right? And the first thing I did here is just assign it to a local variable. This isn't like necessary. I think it reads a little bit better. But I assign that to the param state. And so now I'm passing state here, getting a response, parsing that response. Looks like I'm taking JSON results. So I'm digging into that JSON object and I'm setting that to members, and then I'm passing members back to my welcome index. All right, that's kind of a lot. Any questions coming up so far as I'm going through this?
With that module, Tim, when it searches under the full state name but sends us the state abbreviation, is that just like an inbuilt functionality? If you have like an array with arrays as elements, and if you have that there, that's just how Ruby HTML EIB reads it?
It's a feature of this form.select here with my kind of Rails syntax for forms. And so this form.select is really the new thing. And yeah, so I'm basically giving it a value here of state, and then I'm also like populating this because it's going to be a drop down. And how do I figure out what this actually looks like? I've got two ways to do that really, but if I run my server again, one of the ways that I can see like what's generated here is I can just go to the page, can inspect, right? And I can say like, what is this drop down? Okay, this is my select. It's state, so it looks like it's breaking down to, again, a select element, and the name is state, which I declared in the code right here. And then my options with all the values, you can see like value is assigned to the second element of the array, and then the actual what's displayed as an option is the state name. And so this is like a nice like feature of the select from Rails that's helping me kind of like populate this stuff. And it's like, this is what's being generated in the HTML, right? If we go down here, and then it simply like closes my select box. And then my input now is going to be this search by state. It's a submit tag, and I can see that I've like defined that over here as part of that. And so it's nice. It's a nice form from Rails that like not a lot of code on my end that's generating a ton of HTML kind of like for me under the hood, which is nice. And the other way that I could figure this out or like get an idea of how to do this, because I was honestly like when I was doing this, I didn't remember exactly the syntax, but I was like, all right, let me go look and see like what I have here. And so I can go to the API doc. And this example isn't exactly what I have, but you can see like here it's going to be a post. They're setting this person ID as kind of like a nested attribute here for name, and then this gets set automatically, this ID, and you can see like in my version it was just state. It's not nested. This is like a nested version of this. But in my version, the ID is state and the name gets set as state, and that's because I called it state right here. And then I pass it this 2D array. That's all I really need to do here with this form.select. And you can see they're doing it a little bit different, where this is that for them, where they're like getting this array of the name and the ID. You can see that this is gonna end up returning like a 2D array here, because that's how they're kind of like doing this collect, which is, I think collect is the same as map, pretty sure. But yeah, and then you can see like the values that are generated, which is kind of nice. And so value here in this example is p.id, so whatever the ID of the person is, and then what you see, what the user sees, is the name, which is nice.
Thanks, appreciate the little run through.
Of course. Yeah, Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a quick question. When you first went to inspect that page, were you like hovering over elements on the page and seeing details? I've never done that before.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good question. So I clicked this little pointer, and this is like a select. I can select any element on the page when I'm in this like specific mode, right? So I hover, and once I saw like, yep, this is the specific element that I want, I click on it, and then it goes right to that element over here. And now it's like in a different mode over here, but it's basically like brings me right to that element. So if I went back into this mode and I was like, okay, I want to like look at this submit button, now it brings me right to that submit button here, which is a nice way to navigate the dev tools. Cool, good questions, y'all. Keep them coming. I'm like very much when I'm driving here and running through things, you got to stop me when you want to, and I'm happy with you just being like, hey, like if I'm not paying attention to you know, the hands being raised, just be like, hey, Tim, I've got something for you, and you can interrupt, I don't mind. Okay, so where were we? Yep, I was looking at the routes and then wanted to look at how this got built. We figured that out. Now I think we'll go back to the controller. Cool, so yeah, I have this app members, right, that I'm obtaining from the results. And if I want to see what JSON results is, I can, this is another nice thing with Postman, right? I've got this request kind of like saved right here that I've got available. So I know that this results is now pointing to an array of JSON objects, which since I parse this is actually going to be now at this point, members is a hash. All right. And so I'm passing this members back to the page, and I'm doing a similar thing that I did before. Hey, if members is not nil, then let's go ahead and populate the page with the size of my array, and then let's iterate over each of these members and kind of like display some of their attributes on the page. And if my server is running, then I can show that. Let's search for California. They should have a lot of results. $53, cool, that shows up. And then Indeed, looks like I've got an unordered list here that goes through all of them and kind of shows, hey, what's your name? What's your title? What party are you from? And what district are you from? So I could do a little bit of work here on the front end to like make that more clear, but essentially that's what's happening. Good, Ksenia.
Hey, Tim, can you please do a couple of searches by the last name? It's actually not working on my end.
Okay.
Like at all. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, let's see. So I think what's happening because of the way I built this, maybe. Let's see. I don't think it's going to work here because of where I'm at now with like this like search state was the last thing that happened was a post. And instead of redirecting here, I just re-rendered this page. So my URL didn't change, my URI. So let's see. Yep, so it's working for me. And now my new post is kind of showing here. It's a post to search with whoever I search for. What are you getting, Ksenia?
So I get some of them, and they don't get like others. Like I searched for Colorado, like for buck or to get.
Oh yeah. So this is a good. Yeah, totally. So this is a good like segue into like the difference in functionality, right? So these are, I'm searching here for senators that are US senators, not not specific state senator, or they are state senators, not senators of the Colorado like state Senate. I'm searching for members of the US Senate. So I also wouldn't be able to find members of an individual state Senate or House members, right? Because that functionality is totally different. And yeah, I don't have a SAD path in here. I didn't build that into my app. So it's like, it breaks if we basically don't find someone. I think if I like search for like, I don't think I'm a senator.
That answers it.
Okay, cool. Doesn't break, but it doesn't work. Cool. All right, cool. Let's take a quick break. Actually, no, let's not. Let me just finish this real quick, and then we'll take a break after that. I just want to get through this test so we're feeling good about where we're at. Okay, so pass the members back, show some of their attributes. So let's go back to my test. Which one was it? Search. Search state house member spec. Cool. No. All right, so I basically got to here, right, where I was like, all right, I have to search. I select Colorado from the drop down. I click my search, and now because I've stubbed this request, right, with my 200 status and this JSON response, I expect these results to be on the page. The way that I did it is I hard coded the results. Like, it's not the best test, to be completely honest, but I was like, all right, I should see the first member of my array. All right, I didn't even do that the right way. So a better test here would be Diane to get is showing up, and then Ed, I think, is last. Yeah, so I'm going to check that all of my results get displayed, and I could also be checking like, hey, I should have this party. I just wanted a basic test here to get through it. But if I run this now, love hitting this up arrow, but okay, here we go. Spec. Features, search.
You misspelled Diane's name, by the way, Tim.
Did I?
Yeah.
Interesting. So this should fail then, right?
Should.
Let's see. Yep. It's not Diane, it's just Diane. Thanks for that catch.
You're welcome.
Now if I run it, hopefully my people are in there. Yep, doesn't look like they are. It's Diana. It's not Diane, it's Diana.
Is it case sensitive? Because G is a capital.
Ooh, that's a good question. Let's see. Or I want to leave this and see if it doesn't come up. I don't think it's case sensitive. I'm pretty sure no, but let's see. Looks like I was wrong. So, man, you change your test, man. Change your test in the live coding experience, and who knows what's going to happen. Okay, so it is case sensitive. Interesting. Good to know. Good question there. So now I get it working. But that's essentially, I mean, that took us quite a bit of time, right? But we needed to know all aspects of that, of what was added, before we're going to be able to like dive in and really kind of like understand how the code is working. All right, cool. Let's take a break now, and then we'll jump back in. Let's come back at 34. All right, it's 34. Let's jump back in. We will follow the lesson plan pretty closely. And so for this next part, like, I'm going to do some live coding, kind of like working through this like declarative programming technique and refactoring. And then the second half of class, y'all will get a chance to do that as well. So like I said, don't mind you interrupting me, and you can take notes, you could live code with me, whatever you think is like best for you at this point, like you can do. But we'll follow the lesson plan pretty closely. And if you like have it pulled up, just reload it, because I changed a couple of things, a couple of the naming things this morning. Cool. So what do I want to say? Yeah, this declarative programming technique is nice, because I'm basically saying how I want the code to look without thinking about like the how first. It's like, hey, I know I want my code to look a certain way, to be abstracted into a few separate classes, and I'm just going to write that the way that I hope that it works, and then I'm going to let my tests drive the how. Right? Because I've got these tests, and I'll just let the error messages in the test drive my how. So let's start with this controller. Got this Congress controller. Take like a minute, and you can write this down if you want, but let's just look at this. What is wrong with this controller? What do we not like about this controller? Take a minute to yourself, and then I'll hear from a couple of you. All right, I'd love to hear from a few of you. What don't you like? Claudia, go ahead.
It's not very RESTful. Like the search and search state should probably be like in a service since it's like fetching an API.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so that was like a twofold response. So you don't like that it's not RESTful, and we're not using like a RESTful routes convention that we've used. We have search and search state as our action names, which is like somewhat breaking the CRUD REST handshake. And then you're saying that there should probably be a service involved for going out and getting information from the API. That sound about right? Cool. I like that. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I was also going to pretty much say that there's like this feels like a lot of this code could be handled in a separate folder service model type thing. And specifically, I was looking at the fact that con equals appears twice, like the same exact 3 lines of code appears pretty much identical twice, and that could easily be handled in some kind of a other place that has its own, like a separate method, or it could probably more reasonably be handled, or it could more reasonably be handled out there, and failing that, it could at least be made into a helper method.
I love that. I love all of that. In terms of like you're thinking about this code that you see twice. Is there an acronym that maybe comes to mind that we're breaking here?
I know there is, but I don't remember the name.
That's cool. Yeah, this is like my me pushing y'all to use technical language. Yeah, and so Ksenia and Mike, you're both right? Like dry is kind of this one that Andrew is talking about with repeated code, right? Don't repeat yourself. It's not very dry. We've got repeated code here. We got repeated code here. And SRP, also correct. This code is doing a lot, right? I'm connecting to my API. I'm using these params that are passed in. I'm parsing a JSON response. I'm searching based on the last name of this response for what was passed in. And then I'm also like creating, I'm also like passing a member, this is a hash at this point, a member back to the view, the welcome index. So we're doing a lot of stuff, right? And it's not, that doesn't feel great. We know better than that by this point. So in terms of dream driving, I'm kind of thinking like, all right, I've got this members that I'm passing, and we don't usually pass hashes to the view, right? Like we usually pass some sort of object or an array of objects, right? So let's start there and let's just think about how we want this to look. So I've got this hash, or really JSON results is an array of hashes at this point, if we remember back to kind of like what our structure looks like. I don't have it up. Results points at this array, which is an array of hashes. Cool. All right. I feel pretty good about that. So one thing I want to do here is maybe just like make these an array of objects so that these are encapsulated in a way that I'm used to, that is Rails convention, and that, you know, is something that follows the way that we have been designing code thus far. So what I'll do here is I'll say, you know what, I'm gonna map over this array of hashes, and what I'm gonna do is for each one, I will call this member. I'm gonna say member.new, pass it a member, and end. And now I've basically shown how I hope this should look if I have this member class. So let's run the test. Let the test be my guide. Cool. Uninitialized constant, where in the Congress controller, what, the member. That's what I expected. So yeah, let's just go create that. And you might be thinking, okay, that looks like similar to like, you know, a model, but actually it's going to be a PORO in this case. And so a PORO, just a plain old Ruby object, something to encapsulate some sort of data. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about it. So what I'll do is I don't have a POROs folder yet, but I'm going to make one. And I'm going to put it in app. So anything that's in app gets like loaded up with your Rails application by default. So that's why I'm putting it under this app structure. And yeah, it's just going to be a plain object. So I'm going to call it member.rb. Great. And let's create my class. Okay. I think I should get a different error. Cool. Wrong number of arguments, given 1, expected 0. Man, mod 1 coming back hard on us. Cool. I remember how to do that though. I'll make an initialize. Okay. I'm going to make this a little smaller. Okay, cool. So let me get this controller up. Great. So now undefined method, brackets for member object. Where is this happening? Okay, in the view, line 28. Let's go there. Line 28. Okay, so it looks like I have an array of members. I got through my each, right? But now I'm calling this bracket notation name, and now I've converted these hashes into member objects, so it doesn't like this syntax, right? So now what I need to do is probably go back to my member and actually like give these some attributes, right? And I'm looking right here at how they're going to look, right? We can think of this member as basically the argument that's passed in right here. And so what I'll do is I'll call these attributes, and I'll probably rename this to maybe like member info just to be a little bit more clear. And then, yeah, let's do attributes. I don't want to do this. Let's call this name, and I need to dig in, right? Cool. And then what else do we want? So I know I'm going to have 4, so I'm just going to do that and then change my attribute for each one. I'll say role, and then I'll say party, and then I'll say district. Great. And now, considering I have changed, I have access to these attributes now, but I need to call them with the dot notation. Is there a way I can do this quickly? No, I'll probably just have to do it. Maybe I could do it better than this. I'm always trying to use a shortcut if I can. Okay, so if I do Option Shift, a little too much. Okay, that's all right though. Dot, and now I have to do it individually. Role. This is nice that I named my class attribute what these are to remind me. That's a nice thing to happen when I'm doing some refactoring. And then district. All right. Feel like I'm going to get a new error. Made a lot of changes, but let's see what I got. Cool. Undefined method name happening right here at the same place in 28. What did I forget? Where my mod 1 enthusiasts?
Header reader.
Yeah, I need a way to actually access these attributes. So I can do that by, yeah, setting an adder reader. I'm gonna need a comma. It's all coming together. This is why we did this stuff so much in mod 1. Killed ourselves in mini test. Y'all did mini test, right? Okay, yeah. It is no more. We converted to RSpec, so I think y'all were actually the last ones that got mini test, but RIP mini test. Cool. So now, if I run this, what do I get? Hopefully a passing test. We'll see. And I do. And this is the beauty of tests, right? The beauty of having the test is like, I didn't have to think that much. I just let the test tell me what to do next. And that's like kind of nice. That's why if you write a good test, you can depend on it. And this is an average test, just to be clear. It was an average test, but I could still depend on it. Okay, cool. So that makes me feel good. And let's look at this controller again. So now I got some member objects, but we still have a lot of the same problems that we had before. We've accomplished some encapsulation and some abstraction of the member hashes, but we're still got a bulky controller, right? We still have some issues here. So now I'm going to dream drive a little differently. Now I'm going to say, you know what? I like 1-line controllers. Maybe 2 lines in this case. I like 2-line controllers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out. And I'm going to say, you know what? I know I'm going to render this welcome index, but what do I need to pass? I just need to pass members, right? And then who am I going to get this from? This is where I'm going to get it from, is my facade. All right. And so facade is a new term, but I'm just going to dream drive this. No, I don't want to. I don't want to do that. I don't want to initialize my facade. I don't want to instantiate it as a new object. I maybe want to just call house members. And I want to spell it right. All right, so this is what I want my controller to look like. If I cut this, this is my dream. I just want something this nice and lightweight that I can be like, hey, beautiful. This is where this is the code that I imagine having. This is like the declarative programming approach. All right, so this is also the way that I would recommend, like when you do independent challenges and when you're, consuming a new API, I would do everything in the controller first, because if you do it all in the controller first and it works, then you can take this like red-green refactor approach and say like, okay, I have a feature test that ensures that like, yep, I'm hitting the API, displaying the results on the page. I'm getting like, I'm hitting the API, parsing those results, passing those results to the view and seeing what I expect. That's how I would get it going first in the controller. And then you can take this approach of like step-by-step refactor. All right, so a facade. Let's talk about the facade. And I'm skipping in the lesson plan, I'm skipping the member test until later. So I want to basically refactor using my feature test all the way through. And then once I get my feature test passing with all of these new objects that I'm going to create, then I'll go test them individually. That's my personal preference. That's how I want to do it. Cool. So having this like facade object, what is a facade? It's kind of like, it's the idea, like in construction, it's like this like boilerplate interface that abstracts away something more complex under the hood. And so the facade is, the way I think about it, is it does a lot of data massaging. So I'm going to pass it some data. I might need to massage the data in the way that it's passed in from my controller. Then what I'm going to do is I'm also going to be getting some data back from my service in a response, and then I might need to massage some data there before I pass it back to my controller. All right, so let me do a quick little visual. This is going to be, it's not the best visual, but if we have my controller here, I want this to be a little bigger. We can think our controller just responsible for taking in some params, right? Passing those off to my facade. Cool. Now the facade has a lot of responsibility here. This is the data massage. Great. And whatever I get from those params, I might need to format before I pass it off to my service. So I think of the facade as like this interface between my controller and my service that's kind of like abstracting both of those away from one another and doing some work to ensure that both of those are happy and working properly, not together, but without knowing anything about one another, right? This is the abstraction piece. My facade's going to do some complex data massaging. My service and my controller don't need to worry about that. They just need to be passed certain, they need to pass an input and then be passed an output. So the next thing, after I've done some data massage, then I pass to my service, which then calls the API. All right, this is the pattern. On the way back, right, we've got API, response. Basically, this is going to be like handled by Faraday. And then that comes in to my service. Great. My service, I don't want my service to do much. I literally just want it to do one thing, well, two things. So this is, we'll say, I want to make this a little different. So on the first flow through, the service, you're just responsible for calling the API. Now I get my API response, which is also kind of like abstracted away. Faraday's doing a lot of things to help me out there. Then now within the service, all I want it to do, parse that response. Hand it back to my facade. More data massage, right? See, all right, let me make this a little smaller maybe. and then pass it back to my controller, which the final thing that it's going to get is basically objects to pass. I should say objects or array of objects to pass to the view. All right, and this is like, basically we can think of this as like the first one-way route that hits the API, and then you can think of the API, the second one, as like the second one-way route coming back all the way to the controller. All right, and these essentially are the responsibilities, right? It's just this, and this is the whole thing of single responsibility principle. It's like we want these things to just do what their job is and nothing else. Okay. Cool. So I'm not to that service level yet, but I am at this facade level where I'm like, all right, this is simple. I'm just going to call Congress facade, and I'm going to call this house members, and I'm going to get something back that is nice objects for my controller to pass to the view. All right, let's run it. And again, beauty of having a test, I don't have to think a ton. I'm just going to let them tell me what the next step is. Cool. Uninitialized constant where? Congress controller. What? Congress facade. Great. Similar pattern. I need a facades folder that I'm going to put in app. And I need my Congress facade. Great. And let's just create this class. I mean, this facade, it's also a PORO, right? It's a plain old Ruby object at this point. Nothing too special about it, not really inheriting from anything, just making a new class, calling it a facade. All right. Undefined method house members, cool. And let me get this. Let's get my controller up over here. Cool, I don't have this method. It's a class method, I can tell that because I'm calling it right on the class. That's not how you do it. Okay, and what do I want to do with this? Remember, I've got all that code that I copied. I don't have it as the last thing I copied, which, oh my gosh, could be a problem. Where did it all go? Do I have to Command Z out of this? No, I don't. I have this cool extension, or I guess this is an app. It's called Copy Clip, and it just saves everything I've copied, basically the last 20 things, which is pretty nice and useful. Copy Clip. If you don't have it, I recommend it. So, and then if I hover over this, hey, that looks a lot like what I copy and pasted. So I'll click that, and now that's on my copy clip. So that's nice. Cool. And what do I want to do here? Basically, just comment this stuff in and hope that I get what I want, what I need to work. Or if I don't, I know I'll have a helpful error message, right? Cool, undefined local variable or method params. That makes sense. Params are only available in controllers, right? The reason you get access to params is because that method is defined not actually at application controller, but in action controller, which is what application controller inherits from, right? So action controller base has defined my params method, which I pass to app controller, which passes which all of my child controllers that I create inherit from, and so on and so on. Okay, cool. So what do I need to do then? I mean, I just need to pass this data. So let's pass it. Params, what is my param here? State. And then I'll call this params. So now I've got a parameter named params that I'm passing in, and I can access it here, right? So now I feel a little bit better, like things are going somewhat more swimmingly, or at least I'll get by this error, and then we'll see what happens. Cool. Type error, no implicit conversion of symbol into integer. Great. So I think I'm just like not accessing this correctly. And I think that that's because I don't actually need this params :state. I already converted it here. So at this point, what I believe is params is a string. And based on my test, it should be a string of CO if I'm doing things the way that I think I am. And so let's see, params, yeah, it's already that. Cool. So let's get rid of that. Get rid of that. Exit out of here. Run it again. Cool. And now I'm also thinking, you know, maybe I don't call this params here because it's not actually params, right? It's a state. At this point, I've broken it down to be the state abbreviation. So maybe I call it that. Because naming is important, right? Naming helps me help you, which indeed speeds you up and helps us make a ton of money for the company, right? The faster you are and more efficient you are as a dev, man, make money for you, make money for that company. All right, cool. So now I've got this controller in a state that I like. Hey, controller doesn't need to know anything about this facade. That's why it's a facade. Pass it some params, get back some member objects, happy, render my index, my welcome index. But what's wrong with my facade? Still bulky, Mike says, I agree. What do you think, Keegan?
It's doing the work of the service.
Yeah, it's not to SRP, right? It's still, if we look back at my little chart, it's basically doing all of this and all of this. So we got to break it down one more time into a service object. And we'll do that after a break. Let's come back at 09. All right, it's 09. Let's move on to this service portion. So again, we're going to use this declarative programming technique, and I'm going to imagine what I want to have, right? So I'm going to say, if I look back at my chart, what does this service need to do? Call the API, parse the response. Okay. So in that case, I'm thinking it's going to take all the way to line 10 is going to be the services job. This looks like data massage to me, right? So let's take this and say, I'm going to have some JSON here. I know I need something called JSON just to work with my current local variables. And that's going to be coming from a Congress service. And what do I want to call this? I mean, I could just call it house members again, but I'm going to say fetch house members. Cool. What do I need to pass it? Not totally sure, to be honest, but I'm thinking that the one thing that's dynamic that comes in here is from state abbreviation and then state here. So I'll pass it the state abbreviation. I know I've got access to that here. And then what else do I want to do? Basically, take all of that and put it in my service. So I just cut that. And now my facade looks a little bit better, right? Taking in some data from the controller, immediately passing it to the service, doing a little bit of data massage after that when it comes back, right? So I'm just imagining this is how it should work. Cool. I've got my trusty test. All right, uninitialized constant now in the Congress facade. What? The Congress service. Okay, I expected that. I'll make a services directory. In that directory, I will make a Congress service.rb. And I'll just define it right now. No. Okay. I should get an undefined method at this point. Let's just ensure I spelled everything right. Always good to do one thing at a time. Let the test, it's good to predict your tests, but I like to let the test tell me what to do next so I don't get too far ahead of myself. All right. This is gonna be fetch house members. Great. Cool, wrong number of arguments given 1 expected 0. This is going to be my state here. And now, need to get my what I copied. And at this point, I'm gonna call this state because yeah, that's what I want to call it. I'm using this state abbreviation here. I was using it in the past, but I'm just going to get rid of this line now and have it interpolate the state that gets passed in right here. All right. I feel good about that. Let's see what else is wrong. Looks like nothing. So, okay. That feels all right. I've moved things over to where now they are certainly more SRP, but I can even make this method more SRP, right? Like, what if I want to reuse this service maybe for a different endpoint? Well, this is just setting my API key, right? And starting my connection object with Faraday. This seems like a good thing that I could refactor. Let's make a method called con. Let's put this in here. Now, anytime this con is referred to, it's just going to refer to this method. I can get rid of that. And great. This looks good. Now, another benefit of this is when I unit test my service, I can unit test both of these methods that they are indeed returning what I expect. I don't actually love this either, this JSON.parsing. This parsing could also be reused, right? For every single endpoint that I use. You might even say this, if I have multiple services, would be a good object to push up into maybe a parent service class called API service that Congress service inherits from, and then this JSON parsing just gets inherited from there. That seems like reasonable choice, right? I'm not going to do it just for this one or right now. I'm not going to do it because I only have one service. At the point that I have two services, right, like two separate services that do maybe like contact separate APIs, my JSON parsing is going to be the same for all of them. Then maybe we push it up. But let's do this. How do I want this to work? basically, I just want to do this. So now I'm kind of like declaring what I hope to have. See if I screwed things up. Doesn't look like I did. Okay. So now I've got 3 class methods in here in this Congress service. They all kind of work in conjunction. But let's look at my facade also. All right. Looking at these things together. My controller comes in, gets the param state, passes that immediately to the facade. My facade takes in that state abbreviation and says, hey, I'm handing you off to the service. But when I get something back from you, which is going to be parsed JSON, then what I want you to do is I want you to create some member objects that I can then pass back to the controller. I actually don't even need this anymore now that I'm looking at it. Like at members is not getting passed from the facade back to the controller. The instance variables only get passed implicitly from the controller to the view, right? So what's actually being passed right here is the return value of this map is being passed as my return value of this house members method. So I can do this, run it again. And now I'm taking up a little less space in memory because I'm not declaring an instance variable that I'm not using. Cool. And yeah, if we think about this, when I pass this state abbreviation to the service, what happens here? We call our connection object, which sets our API key. We pass in our URI here to the specific endpoint that we want to go to with the dynamic parameter of state. Then we parse that response here. Whatever comes back through, we parse the response.body and we symbolize the names. And we hand it back to our facade. Our facade creates some member objects here, hands those back to the controller, which in turn hands those member objects to the view. How we feeling? Feeling all right? Questions? Concerns? All right, so now what I want to do is make some tests, right? I did TDD this whole thing, but really I've got a feature test and I've got, which is an integration test of all these pieces. I've got no unit tests yet, but I do want some unit tests. So let's start with what we started, maybe the lowest lift, a member object, right? So I'll create a POROS spec folder, and I'll create a member spec.rb. Cool. I'll probably do like my require here. This is going to be a pretty similar to mod 1 test. Let's get my member object up so I can know what I'm looking at here, what I expect. I'm going to say describe my member. It cool. This is all I really want to see. It abstracts and encapsulates member data that can in turn be read. Great. So I need a member object, right? And I'll probably pass it some of this JSON data that I have available. Where is that stuff? JSON. Cool. Let's go with Diana. And we don't need everything, right? I don't need that. I don't need this. I do need role. I don't think I had gender on there. Let's do party. And then what was the other one? District. So cool. Let's save this. Member info is my hash there. I'm going to pass member info. And I'll save this to member. And then this is going to be my test. Expect. Wow, man, tab 9 just being great for me right there. It's not perfect, but it's close. Great. And then we want the role. And this is going to be D. Simple test, right? Back to the mod 1. Back to the mod 1 days. And this will be district. Diana, what's up?
I had a quick question about this test. Is it common to do it this way for Poros, or if we have a cassette that, for example, has that data, is it common to use that instead?
Because this is a unit test just for this Poro, we shouldn't have to use a cassette from VCR, because that's just dealing with like a scenario where I actually have an API call going on. But because this is just a unit test with just a member object, I want to make this thing as simple as possible. And the way that I could do that is literally pass in what I know is passed in when I do this in the Facade, which is actually interesting. When I pass in all of this member info, what I'm actually doing is passing everything here.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of it just doesn't get used. So a better test, now that I'm looking at this, is honestly, instead of deleting everything like I did, let's do it exactly the way that it's going to happen in the code. And so this is like what gets passed in, but I only end up using, right, the name, role, party, and district. I have access to all of these if I wanted to add them in any way. That's kind of the nice thing. I'm passing it all in, so I could just add those instance variable adder readers, and then if I want to display that stuff, I can, but I don't need to. But yeah, so this is like, I want you to think of it as like a mod 1 unit test. Like, we're just making sure that all of this data is available and can be read.
Okay, thank you.
For sure. Okay, cool. So I'm going to run this thing. Okay. Oh, yeah, interesting. So doesn't know what to do with these. I'm going to change those to nils, because null is like a type that JSON defines as basically like its version of nothing. And then in Ruby, our type is nil, our version of nothing. Okay. Cool. Now, probably want to go test my service object. So actually, no, let's test the facade. It says in the lesson, oh, we're not going to test the facade. Yes, we are. We are going to test it. Let me make a facades folder. And we'll test this in a similar way where we basically just have some input and some output, right? We've got one method and we expect the input to be one thing and the output to be another. So let's do Congress facade spec. Oh, did not name that right. .rb. Cool. Let's say I want to grab my member spec because it's going to be similar. All right. What else do I need to do here? All right, so I've got my facade. Not sure exactly how this is going to need to work. But I can let my test tell me, right? Kind of can like dream drive these tests. What do I want when I pass this? Well, I want this return value to look a certain way. So I just want to say that it's going to be facade dot, no, expect facade dot to be, how do we do this? An array, I think. Yeah. And then I want to do facade dot first to be a member. Dana, did you have another question? No? Okay. Cool. So yeah, let's run this and see where I got. I don't think that this is like totally complete, but let's see. Oh, I ran the wrong test. Cool. Unhandled request. Tried to make this. Hey, there's no cassette. All right, I've seen this before. So let's go to maybe my feature, which is called search members by house. Cool. I think what I'll do is just stub out this request, right? Do that at the top of my test so that I'm stubbing this and not actually making a call. Cool. Let's see. I did that in the wrong place. I need it in here. Okay. Hoping that this will just take care of it. It may not. And it does. Very nice. So now I'm seeing some repeated code, right? where I'm doing this like reading and this stubbing of the requests, I could make a method in my Rails helper, right? That just calls this method, that just basically does this. So let's imagine that scenario. Maybe not in my Rails helper. Where would I want to put this? Maybe I'll poll you all. Where would I want to put a helper method in a place where all my tests get access to it and I can just call it? So now I'm not repeating this like kind of like ugly stubbing, I guess you could say. Any ideas? Spec helper? Yeah, okay, let's see. Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, I think I could probably do it in here. Let's see. What do I want to call this? House request. Cool. And then if I come back here, now, essentially what I hope can happen is I just do this and I still get a passing test. But let's see. I haven't done this in a while, so I'm not sure. Cool. That works. That's a little bit nicer than what I had before. And now I will also change my feature. To use that again. I don't think I need this either. Okay. Great. And I want to run everything just once, see where I'm at. That's a nice feeling. Some green on those tests. Okay. So I think because we're at 10:33, what I would like to have happen is y'all get a chance to go and do this now. So the thing that I didn't test is the service, and I'll just do it. I'll just copy and paste because I want you all to have more time. All right, so I need to create a new folder over in spec called services, and then create a Congress service spec. And I'm just going to take this from the lesson plan because I'm pretty sure it will just work. Let's pull up the service. And so the way that we test services, actually, it's not just going to work because I think I have different method names. Fetch house members is what we need here. All I'm doing is expecting the JSON to be formatted in a specific way, right? Like I'm not caring necessarily about what those values are, but I am caring about like, hey, these need to be, I don't care about the actual value, I care about the data types that are in here. So I'm saying, hey, go hit this endpoint that we've been hitting, and then expect, this is kind of named a little bit weird. Let's name that response. Expect the response to be a hash. So expect the JSON to be parsed into a hash. Dig in here, expect this results to be an array, and then grab the member data and expect the member data to have specific key value pairs that I am going to be expecting over in my facade when it's passed there. So I'm kind of just like saying like, hey, go out to this API and let's expect the data to be formatted in a specific way. All right, that's what I'm testing in my service, that the format is what I expect. All right. Similarly, I'm going to call stub house request is like the first thing I do. And yeah, let's just run them all and see what happens. I didn't change search everywhere. What line is it coming from? 11. Yeah, this needs to be response 2. Cool. And now, indeed, I can depend on this, the structure of my JSON coming back in this form. And what this really is, like more than anything, this is documentation, right? Like this is what I expect this API endpoint to return to me. And like, that's all I need to really test for my service. One thing I could test is that it's going to be a 200, but since I'm stubbing the value, I kind of already know that, and I already tested that in my feature test, so I'm not going to test it here. Okay, cool. What I want y'all to do, I'm going to put you in some breakout groups. Hold on, we got a question. Why do you define it outside of the last end block, Tim? Oh, in the spec helper? I don't know if that actually like needs to be that way. It's just like separate from any of this configuration stuff. So that's why I defined it outside of this do end, because I'm like, I'm not configuring anything here. I'm just like creating a helper method, right? So like, that's all. That's why. Yeah, Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, like would it be easy to make a module within the spec folder for that stub?
Maybe a better design pattern there, like make a module called test helper methods and then include that. The only problem with that, I don't even call it a problem, is, well, no, okay, so here's where we could include that in our like Rails helper, and then it gets included globally, so we have access to it all over every spec. Or if we didn't want to do that, and we said, maybe we'll just include it in the specific specs that are going to use stub house requests, but then like our include is not really dry, so we could include it in the Rails helper to avoid that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I haven't got that to work yet, but I'll try. I'm gonna keep trying.
Okay. Cool. And yeah, and it's one of those configuration things, right? Where if like you'd rather just do it this way instead, like that's fine. I mean, this file can get convoluted pretty quick. So yeah, I think what the pattern you're suggesting, I would say is a better pattern, but like, it's not something I want you to like spend like more than like 15, 20 minutes on, to be honest. Yeah. All right. So, the heck, did I not push this udo section up? Okay, no, I did. I just hadn't reloaded the page. All right, I'm gonna put you all in some breakout groups. If we look at the lesson plan, apply what you've learned thus far to refactor the search action in the Congress controller. And I would do this, I would practice this declarative approach and dream driving approach if you haven't already. And it's just like I think that as long as you can develop a process for refactoring, and I think this declarative approach is like a really nice one, as long as you already have a feature test that you know works, then this should be hopefully a way that is a little less, there's just less decision making, right? Like I make a decision of how I imagine the code working if it's perfectly clean, and then I let the test make the rest of the decisions for me. And once again, this, go to my controller. This is the method that I want y'all to refactor. Good thing is, if you were coding along, and that's not necessarily like you didn't need to, but if you were, you've already got your facade, you've already got your service. You don't need to make a new facade or a new service. You just need to make new methods if you've got that. And if you haven't yet, that's fine. You get to like go through the process of making the classes as well. Okay, I'm gonna put y'all in breakout groups. I think what I would like to see happen is actually, yeah, let's take a break first, and then that'll give me a chance to make the groups, give y'all a break, and then when you come back, I'll just explain how I would love for things to go. Let's come back at 46. All right, friends, it's 46. Let me explain what I'd like for you all to do. I don't mind. Some of you will be groups of 2, some of you groups of 3. I don't mind if you as a group decide, hey, let's do driver navigator, or as a group you say, hey, let's use one another as resources, but let's all type independently so we all get the practice typing. That is, I'll leave that up to you as a breakout group to do it how you would like. And yeah, I want you to try to refactor that that search action. I put like, if you're in a place where you're like, I don't remember which part is supposed to go here, I think reference this little like flow chart, you could call it, that I put in code help. That was just the one that I wrote in that document of like, hey, what's the single responsibility of this class? And then it's going to be like, what are we doing here? Are we simply going out and getting the data from the API and then parsing it? Service. Are we massaging the data to look a certain way? Facade. Yeah, I think that's all I'll say. We're going to have like the majority of the time to do this. I'm going to be around the whole time, so ask for help if you want me to pop in. We're going to come back together at 45, so 11:45 Mountain Time, and just kind of review what we came up with, maybe where the questions are, maybe some different patterns. I imagine that you all will probably have code that looks a little bit different at least, but I'd like for you to use the feature test to guide you from the start. Once you get all of your objects in place and the place that you want them to be, or working with that feature test, and that's green, now you can unit test individually the service level, the facade level, the methods that you create in there. Questions about what I'm asking you to do? Go ahead, Andrew.
Is there a specific branch that this stuff is on, or is it just on the main branch? I'm not sure exactly where it is.
Yeah, so you won't have what I've done thus far. You basically could reference that from the lesson plan, but to start, like the branch that this is on is called Refactoring Start. And let me just post that in. I'll put that in the in code help. And I also, like, if you look in code help, as last night I told y'all I pushed a new branch, and that is that's a link to the GitHub repo, that specific branch. Does that sound all right, Andrew?
Yeah, I just need to find out where exactly all the stuff is. But that shouldn't take too long, I hope.
Yeah, if you just pull down from the refactoring start branch, like, you'll be where you want to be, where you need to be. All right, cool. I'm gonna open these up. Like I said, I'm around. Hit me up if things get hairy, and work in a break, and we're back together at 45.
Hey Tim, I'm having this issue real quick that like the the facade can't like read into the Congress service. And Harrison was saying that he had this issue before. And everything kind of looks right, I think, to me and to him, but just not really sure why. And this was for both of these methods. So like while you were doing it in classes, it was happening.
Interesting.
Oh, I think I see it now. You're trying to call, you don't have a self on the get found members. And so you're trying to call a non like class method in the facade, and it's not picking it up because you're not initializing the Congress service.
Oh, over here on this side? On the
Yeah.
service side.
Okay, I didn't actually catch that at first. Okay. That's why it's picking up the Congress service, but not finding the method.
Oh.
Cool. Yeah. This is why we talk it out, right? I think that probably should get it there, get us where we need to be.
Maybe if I restarted it.
I always figure it out right after you got here, Tim. Like the second you get here.
Right. I'm the king of being a rubber duck, right?
Yeah, just run. Hopefully that picks it up.
Oh, okay. Oh, well.
Message unauthorized. Seems like it has something to do with the API key now, but
Yeah, I probably don't even have it because, right, if I just switch to your branch, the config, where's that config? Yeah, I don't even have the application YAML, so that makes sense.
Got it.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, thank you for coming in.
Of course. Yeah, no, holler anytime.
All right.
Thanks.
All right, see ya.
So we ran into the lack of the cassette, and I guess I just don't know how to read the errors. Because typically, when they run tests, errors follow.
Yep.
Right? I follow the errors, but so it's saying I ran. Okay, let me back up. Here's what we did. We created a facade. We don't really have anything in there yet. We created porous file. We changed the view to, basically change the hash values to calling methods, to calling attributes on the member objects.
Cool.
And then created a porous spec, which is passing. So life is good.
Cool.
So then we copied this method search and renamed it to search state because we have two search. I'm not sure about that, but stop me if this is wrong. Because the first thing that we're searching for is the US senators by
Yep.
their last names, and the second one is by the state.
Yep.
What is this, and what am I supposed to do with it?
Go, you can finish. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's kind of what I have.
Okay. So let's look at this test. Where is this test at?
Oi, what is this? What did I just do?
I don't know. Yeah, okay, that's the one we want.
Yeah.
Cool. So, all right, can we put this file? I want to see this file and the terminal next to one another. Cool, thank you. And let's look at the top of this error message. Okay, so it's saying failure error, con.get Congress v1 116 Senate members.json is basically being hit, and worse, and VCR is saying like, hey, you can't hit this because we don't know what to stub this with, like which cassette or how to handle this request. And So is there anything you notice about this request and the request that you're stubbing?
What am I stubbing? Congress members house, Colorado. And we don't have a stubbing by the state, I guess. We don't have a cassette for the state. We have where's my fixtures. How do I spell fixtures?
Yep, like that. You got it. So we've got.
Wait. But I guess what I'm saying is, I think we only have a cassette for one of them, but not for both of them.
So that's like not completely true in this case. We have a JSON fixture that has members of the US Senate that we could read from. But in this specific scenario that you're doing, you are stubbing out basically the wrong request for this file. So you're using Colorado House members and you're stubbing the House members by state. This is the wrong. Let's go back to search US Senate members, I think.
Let's go back to search.
Okay, no, we weren't ever on this one. So what do you, yeah, okay, so when you're running this, to get to this error, search state house member spec. Got it. Okay, what this is saying is you're running this house member spec, but what you're actually stubbing out is, or what the request that's happening is going to the Senate endpoint, the v1.116 Senate endpoint, and you're stubbing the House request in this specific error. And how do I know that? Well, if we look at the state House member search happy path, and if we look down here at number 19 is where this happens. So in 19, what you're doing is when you do fill in search with Sanders, that's hitting the Senate endpoint. And the Senate endpoint is not stubbed out as part of this request. The House endpoint is.
So does it mean I have to rewrite the test?
No, you shouldn't have to. So let's look at this Congress controller. Let's look at the line 25.
Oh, like
Yeah.
this? Because I copy pasted the code, but
Yeah.
really because we're searching for two different things.
Exactly. Yeah.
I
So
see.
in that top one, you're searching for the Senate members, but here we want to search for the House members. So you're hitting this. It's kind of like you're conflating two different things together. Does that make sense? Where this one is the one that we want the House members searched for, and you're stubbing that request. But actually in this controller, if you go back to your Congress controller, you're never hitting that request that you stub. So you're still hitting the Senate request down here, and you need to hit the House request.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's hard.
It is hard.
So like, no, I'm saying like we can't just say, House here because I guess I'm just gonna think out loud. You don't have to give me the answer. So like over here, oh, this is a fiction. Members, House. Oh, okay. So we just have to, change it to House and change it to House and then interpolate the state.
Yep.
Like pass an argument of the state.
Yep,
Maybe
exactly.
I didn't have it here.
Well, so we don't need to pass it in this specific aspect because it's passed implicitly through params, right? Because this is a controller action, so it's gonna get passed in params as the value coming through in that select form.
Say it again. It's gonna be passed. What does it mean?
So it's being passed from your form in your view through params when you hit that submit button. So like in the test here, search state house members test, when you do select Colorado and then you hit submit, that passes it via params. So that'll get passed into this controller action via the params. And you can see that if you put a pry here at the top of this method and then run this test. We won't get to the error yet, I don't think, but we'll hit this pry. And now if you look at params, what should be passed is whatever you passed in your state CO. So whatever you passed in your test is what comes through here in params. And then on the flip side, if you were running it in the browser, whatever you actually select from that drop down is what gets passed here.
Yeah, I got stuck on the search yesterday for a project. Like this is still new to me.
Totally, yeah. No,
Okay.
Here's the thing: it is new, and I expect this to be a struggle for y'all, and that's why we got like some dedicated time to like go through this. I feel like copy and paste always gets me in trouble too, because I'm like, why is this not stubbing out? And in this case, it's like you're hitting the wrong endpoint on 20. Well, on 26 now you have it closer, but now all you need to do is interpolate the state that gets passed in params, and then you'll get past that like unhandled request error by VCR.
Okay, we'll try that. Gracias, señor. Okay, let's see. So what's the...
We just need to do like state equals params brackets state, and then pass in state into that URI.
Yeah, and you can do it two separate ways here. So if you uncomment this line, yep, and then yeah, you could just do param state here if you wanted, or the reason I set it in my example is just because I think it reads a little better to not pass the params there and just assign a variable, so then you know like, hey, this is the state abbreviation coming in here. But this, in theory, should get you, if you do one more slash now after the curly bracket, yeah, so now in theory this should get us past that specific error.
Seriously?
All right, so it's saying it doesn't know how to handle this one. So let's look at. So now we've got it changed to the correct thing. So let's look at where this is coming in from, like which error this is. State house member search path. Okay, so let's look at the.
You see, it's not really reading it.
Oh, true. Yeah, I think we just interpolated it wrong, possibly, but it looks right to me.
Right? I mean, I don't think I need these guys. No.
Oh, is it single quotes? No, you have double quotes.
What quotes? We need quotes here?
Oh,
you're missing
those. Yeah, it should be like that, I think. No,
I thought we only needed for the string because, like, in the project, I'm using I'm interpolating token. My token.
Yeah, so we don't want those single quotes around it because params is basically a variable that we should be able to use here. Oh, maybe it's not. Maybe no, that should be right with the way that you're accessing it. Yeah, let's see what param state is. I think it should be what we expect. Yeah. It's interesting that's not getting interpolated there. So let's just set it as a value.
Yeah, it doesn't like it. But whatever.
No, I think you need to Command Z
What
again.
happened? Oh.
Yeah. All right, so let's, set that as like a variable and just see if that gives us something different. And now that I'm looking at it, I think that this 116 actually doesn't exist in the request, and that might be our issue. But so if we run it here, I think we'll get the same error, to be honest. And then I think that the better way to like look at this is Congress V1 116 House CO members. All right, that kind of looks right to me.
Oh, it did read the state, so that we did it.
Well, not necessarily. I think we're still getting a similar thing. Yeah. So let's look at, what do I want to look at? Can we bring your test up to be like side by side to this controller?
Can we? Yes. That's.
Yeah, okay, it is what I thought. So if we look at our stub request, we're still, and then if you look at the, let's bring the controller up on the left side.
Well, but this test, I guess this test is for the search, but we don't even have a state for, we don't have a test for.
No, so this is for the search state, because this is for the search state because we're searching, like you can see, like we're selecting Colorado from state, we're clicking on search by state on 18 and 19. The problem is if we look at this request here, the stub request that starts on 6, you can see the request we're stubbing is slightly different from the request we're making on 27. So on 27, we're actually, there's a little bit more of the URI that actually is wrong. So that V1 116 should just be V1.
Should just be.
See how it
V1.
goes? Yeah, it goes V1 and then it goes members and then it says house.
So members right there.
Yeah, so we would need another / and then house. Yep, and we still need house after that too. And then we need a /. Yeah, so that looks good to me. So let's run it again and see. I think we will get a something different at least, but let's see.
Question. Is there a difference between current?
Oh yeah, that's also, yeah, that's wrong as well. So I don't think it's current there. I'm not sure. Let's look in Postman because you hit it in Postman, right?
I don't have it saved. But,
okay. Yeah, okay, so this is good. We get a different error, but the thing is we're hitting this current endpoint and that's not an actually valid endpoint. It's members. So we need to change both to members instead of current. Current is what the other endpoint expects. So the other like US Senate endpoint expects it to be current.json, but we expect this specific endpoint is members.json.
Why?
Because the API said so, right? Like this is ProPublica's design, right? We're dependent on ProPublica and they decided what this URI would be. So that's why.
Okay. So wait a minute.
That one needs to match as well.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah, so it has to match. And these requests, like whenever you're getting this unhandled request, this is the first thing I would look for is like, is the request that I'm making in my test the same as the request that I'm making in my in my service is where it'll eventually be. But like, are those two things matching up? Because if I get them right or incorrect, even by one character, I'm going to get that unhandled request.
Okay. We should be using Postman, I think. That would eliminate the
Yeah, because Postman at least shows you if you've got the correct like URL that you're hitting, and then you can see, okay, yeah, I actually can get a response from this, or no, I'm getting something blank, so my URL's wrong.
Right on.
So cool. So this is, it looks like from a different test now, right? Or no, it's the same, but it's for this find all. Yeah, so you don't need this find all code as part of this specific controller, because this stuff is like in this specific one, basically you've got some conflating of what that first controller action is doing when we're trying to search by, set it by last name, and what this one's trying to do, which is this one we're trying to like just get all the members for this specific state. So I would inspect what data looks like, because I think you've got on 31, the way you're digging into this hash, I don't think that's what it looks like. So I would actually put it one up from there, like above members. Yeah, and then I would look at data, because I think it's going to be different than what you have there. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's like, hey, it goes data, results, and then that is an array of members. So let's look at data. Cool. Yeah, and then if we do data results, then that is now our array that we would need to iterate through in order to create our member objects. Cool. Yeah, and so then at that point, right here, we have our array. Yeah, we would want to do like, yeah, exactly. We want to iterate over it. And then create our member objects from there. I don't ever like doing this in Pride, just like to kind of, just because like you have to get it all perfect here. And then you can't even like use this return value of the block. So what I like to do here is like, okay, cool. So you got all the names. So you realize you can get everything that you want out of this, which is nice. What I like to do at this point is probably like take this block, put it into my code, and then pry into the block so I can see everything member has and be like, oh yeah, okay. Inside that block is where I want to instantiate new member objects and pass basically all of the member attributes to the member object. And then this like member name that you have happening in there, that'll happen actually in the member class, where it's like assigning an attribute to a member name.
We don't even need that, right?
Correct.
Alexander, are you following everything?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm gonna let y'all work. Actually, we're gonna come back in like 5, but I'm gonna bounce out.
Thank you so much for your help.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for calling me in.
For sure.
Cool. All right, welcome back, everyone. Does anyone have some code broken, working, either or, that they want to talk me through?
If we're not all going to volunteer at once, I will.
Cool. Yeah.
So I will share my screen and admit my faults. So my partner and I think we may have actually been doing the wrong thing. When I first ran the test, this is the first thing that happened, which was not expected in the in the lesson plan. And so we kind of like got over a couple of hurdles that kept coming back to this. So I would love to figure out how to work through this VCR error independent of getting everything else running.
Yeah, for sure. So let's bring up, you've got this members, this thing happening in the facade. Let's bring up this specific test.
Okay. And like full transparency, I'm just going to go for it. Like, should we have been running the US Senate members or the House members? Because that even came into question.
Yeah, so since I like went through the whole House one, I was hoping that y'all would try to like do the refactor of the Senate one.
Okay. And we're at least headed in that direction. So
Okay,
there's
cool.
And you want me to bring up that test like side by side?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then we'll come back here. Okay.
Okay, cool. So it says in the Senate, we should look at line 5. All right, that's our path there. And then it says line 27. Okay, so that's telling me like both of these are basically failing. And let's get it down to 1 failure just to like hone in. Let's go with this top one. And then I also was going to ask you to bring up that Congress facade on the left, because that's actually, so the search state is a different request. So if we look at the Congress facade, that's where you've got this Senate request happening. Cool. Okay. So let's run the same test, but then let's do colon at the end of this and then 5, I think, so that we can focus in on this one.
Actually move down there.
All right, cool. So we're back down to 1. All right, so we get this unhandled request, and this could happen for a number of reasons, but usually the first place that I want to look is like, hey, do I have this stubbed, and is it exactly the same as like, is it the same request in my test as it is in my actual like application code? So let's check that. So right now we don't have anything stubbed. So let's maybe comment back in this stubbing here. All right, and then can I read this whole request line on line 7? I just want to like see that it's the same. Okay, so that's members.json. I'm just going to check one thing. Yeah, that should be the same. Okay, cool. So let's run this again and see, since we made a change, let's see if something different happens. Cool, we still get this unhandled request, Congress, V1, Senate, members.json. All right, great. So I'm looking at this and I'm seeing a slight difference in the test request, or really I should say request URL, and the URL happening in the facade. There's just, it's subtle, it's slight. Does anyone want to help us out and maybe you all notice it? Maybe you don't, but.
Is it the 116 here? It's not. So it's
Sure.
got.
Yep, sure is. So that's usually where I go to first when I get this unhandled request error is like, all right, are these requests, is the request that I'm stubbing out and the request that's actually running in the code, are those things the same? So we made that change. Let's go ahead and run it again. Cool. So now it looks like we're getting a 204 response when we expect to get a 200. And I think I know why that's happening, but I'd be interested to hear what you think, Jahara.
So we're expecting the status code to be 200, and right now it's not finding it. I know that the key is there. I know it's the right one. Looking at the headers and everything, there's nothing obvious that sticks out to me, but I feel like I'm missing something.
Cool. Yeah, I think that what I'm seeing here is like I got a 204, which tells me that even though I'm stubbing out this request here with a 200, something else is happening past that stub that is then saying 204. And 204 means everything went swimmingly, but there's actually no content to display. So that leads me to think like, okay, let's look back at my controller. Let's think about what's being returned from this facade. And I'm looking at it and I'm seeing, it looks like I should get an array of member objects returned at the controller level, because the final thing to run in this method at this point is that map down there. So let's look at the Congress controller and kind of like see what the last line is to run in the Congress controller for this specific method, which is actually the search, not the search state. So this is nice that we have this at members. And what I would do here is kind of like probably pry in and look at what at members looks like at that point, just to like see what's happening there.
Should those params be search or state?
Depends what we called our form on the other side. So let's look at what param search is.
Okay, so
okay, cool. So that came through the way that we expect. And then let's see what at members is. Okay, great. We've got a member object in there, but it looks like none of the attributes were set correctly for this specific member. But I think that's still like, okay, that's still not what our current error is, because our current error, remember, is we thought we were going to get a 200 on this page, but what actually got rendered was a 204. And so 204 is no content. And the reason is because we didn't explicitly call render welcome index as like the final line of our controller here. On line 4 is where we probably want that. And remember, like rendering happens either by like implicitly by default, but it's tied to the name of the controller action. So because we don't have a search.html.erb in the views controller, that's like, or in the views Congress folder, we can't actually, like, basically Rails looks for it by default, doesn't find it, and then is like, okay, there's no content here. So if we want to render something different, we have to explicitly say like, hey, render this welcome index. I think you're going to need to have a slash where you have that hashtag there. I mean, maybe, I don't know, that might work, but I always think of it as I'm giving it the path to like that specific view. All right, let's get out of that and maybe take that pry out too. Cool, we got past our error. And now our view is basically saying like, hey, you were expecting Senator Bernard Sanders to be found. Actually, he's not there because, and that's actually for a number of reasons. We called this, can we bring up that welcome index.html on the right?
Why am I not finding out where? There it is.
Cool. Okay, great. So we've got this if at members here, which is going to be basically searching or iterating through an array of member objects. But remember, we designed this specific view slightly differently at first, where we called this at member on line 20, and that is the code that's supposed to like display when we find one senator, right? So we've got some work to do from here where it's twofold. We should call our instance variable on line 3 of the controller at member, because we're assuming we're just going to get one back here, one object. And then from there, we've got to figure out, remember when we looked in pry, we saw that like the member object was nil. So now we'd have to go to the facade and be like, okay, it's creating this object, but none of the attributes are being passed in correctly. I need to dig in and find out why that is. And usually what I would do at this point, since this specific endpoint doesn't actually return the data in the same format that we expected the house to return it in. So what I would do here is probably like look at what my response, or look at how my JSON looks right after it gets parsed, and see like if indeed JSON results is giving me anything at that point that's like I can work with, which is the member data, or not, or do I need to dig a little bit further into that response? Cool. Cool, so it looks like JSON results does indeed like point to a array, but then I see it's like member of Congress. It looks like there's some top level keys that then I'd have to dig into even more to get into the second kind of like nested array. You can see members points at an array of the member JSON objects, or in this case, the member hash. And that's where the data that I would need for this specific member needs to be set. So I'm digging into this JSON results array when I really need to be digging into the JSON results. And then I have to iterate through that array, dig into members, then iterate again through that array. So we're like a little bit away, like we're a couple of data types away from the actual attribute info that we want to pass our member object. And if you remember, this specific endpoint, remember we're doing that find all at some point that like basically takes in whatever I passed to my controller, which is the last name. And then I'm basically kind of breaking that down into, I'm using my find all to break that down to just one member. And then I'm digging into that member and I would set the attributes for that member. So that's kind of why we're having this disconnect between when we instantiate the member object on 13, the member data going in there is not actually what we expect from the way that we did it on the house side, but now we have to like design this way or dig in on this side a different way.
You want me to keep doing it, or are we going to lunch?
No, we're going to lunch. But I just, any like follow-up on this, like questions, ideas, like the reason this is hard is because, yeah, the pattern doesn't really work for both endpoints the same way, right? The data looks different in the response. So you have work to do when you're refactoring to actually get this response to look a certain way. And you might have to say, like, you might have to make a decision that says, okay, I might maybe just make an entire new PO called Senate member and then rename my other one to House member, because those things are looking different. And I'm trying to display, if you look even on line 21 and 22 here, I'm like digging into this member object by first name, by last name, by Twitter account. I'm not doing any of that from lines 28 to 31 the way I am in the house. So those are like two different responsibilities in my mind that I might make two different POROs for. Cool. Claudia, go ahead. And here's what I'll say. We're over, so go to lunch if you want. I'll stay and answer some questions.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you're going to push up a refactored version of the search to that repo.
Yeah, I will. I haven't done it yet, to be honest, so I'll probably push it up like later on today. Yes. Cool. Go ahead, Andrew.
This is kind of silly, but I just really want to know, why is it called a PORO?
Plain old Ruby object.
Plain old Ruby object. Okay.
Yep. So it's just the idea there is like, it's not a model, right? That like inherits from active record and gets all of those active record methods. It's just a plain old Ruby object. It's like mod 1, right? Like we're just creating a class, giving it some state maybe, or giving it some behavior in the case of the facade, and then like using it as we would any normal Ruby object. Yep.
Thanks.
Cool. All right, y'all. Good effort today. Take the class survey, please. And yeah, I'll see y'all. Well, Meg will see you at 1 for this. She's going to kick off the pair code review and kind of let you know what to expect there. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Tim.
Thanks, y'all.